I'll get started. So first of all, the thing to say is huge welcome to everybody joining the webinar this afternoon. We're really excited to have you here, and we've got a really stimulating discussion happening this afternoon. So I hope you'll all enjoy it. So this webinar is all about how we can support refugees to be able to succeed in work. So yes, it should be a really great session. So my name is Jamila Qureshi, and I am Programme and Systems Lead within the CIPD Trust. I think some people are still gradually joining, so you won't miss anything at the beginning. So I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping things before we really get into it. So just so you know, you'll have hopefully seen a pop-up that this webinar will be recorded. And it should be just under an hour, so you'll be finished well in time before 1:30. So we'll definitely be wrapped up by then. And you'll have noticed as you're joining, you will have been muted on entry, and we just ask that throughout the webinar that you stay on mute. This is just so that everybody will be able to hear all our presenters and our panel a bit later really clearly, and so we don't have any background noise getting in the way. And as I said, we're really excited to have you all here because we really want you to get involved in the conversation as we're going over the next sort of 50 minutes or so. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Please do make use of the chat function as a way to kind of share your thoughts or network with other people who are attending. So please use the chat function for that. As I said, we will have a wonderful panel who you'll be hearing from a bit later, and we will have Q&A as part of that. And so we really want to hear your questions. So please use the Q&A function for that. So if you've got a really burning question that you want to ask our panel, please submit it through the Q&A function, and we will pick those up there and get through as many as we can today. So before we get into it, I wanted to just share a few things. The other thing I want to say is, just go on to the next slide, is I've obviously introduced myself, but you'll also be hearing from one of my fantastic colleague, Leah, who is going to be chairing our panel today. And Leah is a senior programme manager within the CIPD Trust, so you'll be hearing from both of us today. And towards the end of the session, we'll be sharing a bit more about how you can get involved quite quickly in what we're doing. And I thought I'd just take the first sort of 5 minutes or so just to give you a bit more information about the CIPD Trust. Now, some of you may know a bit about the Trust, some of you may not know very much, and that's okay, because the Trust is just over a year old. So we launched back in April 2022 when our Head of Trust, Sally Ely, joined us. And really, I suppose the way to think of us is with a real extra charitable bit of the CIPD. And what we do is really look to how we can harness the power, skills and expertise of people like you, so people professionals, HR professionals, to really look at how we can tackle barriers to work and create better and inclusive workplaces. And really what we do is act as an amplifier for the CIPD. Many of you will be familiar with the CIPD's purpose of championing better work and working lives. And that's really what we're about too. The distinguisher is that we really focus on where the need is most and where people are facing barriers. And that's what really distinguishes us. And that's really what today's session is all about. We know refugees face more barriers in terms of accessing work, and they're a key group for us as the CIPD Trust. And so today is all about hearing about what you can do potentially within your workplaces, and also how you can directly support refugees who are trying to really succeed in that first role that they've got here in the UK. So I wanted to bring your attention to our impact framework, and I'll just kind of talk about this a little bit. And this is really what underpins everything that we do as the CIPD Trust. And it really is there to hold us accountable and help us keep us focused in terms of what our missions and what we're trying to achieve. As you said, it's really about tackling barriers to work and creating those inclusive workplaces of tomorrow. And as you can see, there's a few ways that we do that. There's a few kind of activities highlighted there, and a couple I just want to bring to your attention. A key area of our work is looking at the profession itself and how we can diversify the profession and think about how we can make sure it's much more representative of the communities that it serves. And we have a number of programmes that we deliver to be able to do that. So, for example, we have our bursary programme, which where we do have a focus on supporting refugees into the profession, and how we can help people get that first step to get into the profession. And then we also have, for example, our Aspiring HRD mentoring program, which is about helping people progress to that really senior level who might need some extra support and who perhaps not represented right at that top level. So really about trying to make sure the people profession is much more representative of the communities it serves. But ultimately, what we're about is making sure we're achieving on the outcomes that we have at the bottom of that impact framework, which I really just want to draw your attention to. And that's about creating greater access to and a better experience of work for individuals. And that's both in terms of the profession itself, but also in terms of work more generally. As the Trust, we really see you as the people profession, the HR professionals, really have that insight and knowledge and expertise on what the world of work is and how it works and how it operates and how you can make that difference to an individual who is facing those barriers to work. And at the moment, we have a focus on 3 key areas: refugees, as you might expect given the title of today's session. But we also have a focus on supporting people with convictions and also people in their 50s and 60s who are trying to return into work after a gap. But again, it's all about supporting those who need that support most. Now, we would like to support everybody who faces barriers, but this is kind of where we're starting from. And as the Trust's work grows and expands, we will be, we will look at other groups that we will be supporting. But at the moment, that's where our real focus is. And obviously today is all about how we can support refugees to succeed in work. Then we want to look at, and again, this is where we see the profession is really well positioned to have that influence and ability to change, and you'll hear a bit more about this very shortly. Is looking at how we can change policies, procedures and practice within organisations to really improve working lives and create much more inclusive workplaces for people who face barriers and for people, which will impact everyone as a whole in terms of making working lives better. And the long-term goal, the aspiration, the real kind of blue skies, we really want to create a diverse, equitable and prosperous society that provides fairer work. And those measures are really, everything that we do is all about making sure we're delivering on those outcomes and getting closer to achieving those outcomes. So all our measures, the way we decide what we're going to focus on, the way we do our work, all has to come back to those. And that really is what holds us accountable and is really important for us and something that we've taken some time to make sure we get right. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what we're about and what we're trying to do. But what does that mean in practice for you? What does that actually mean? Well, I guess the key message that I would like to get across is that as a CIPD Trust, really what we see ourselves as a real convener to bring together you as the HR profession, bring together business, bring together the third sector to really look at how we can collaborate and test ideas and put ideas into action and see how we can test and improve and create more inclusive policies. So today is a really great example of that from some of the panel that you're going to hear from a bit later. But really, I guess one of the things that we sort of think of ourselves, we're more of a do tank than a think tank. So it's all about, what could we try? What could we test? Let's see if that works. Let's see where we get to and see if it's something that could potentially scale and make a difference on a much bigger level. We're also about bringing people together, and I guess that's hopefully what's coming across to help you build your networks and make those connections. And really, we want to enable that. And this is what today's session is all about. And bring you as HR professionals closer to talent and seeing the potential of people who perhaps don't get the same opportunities in terms of the way things are now and how we can change things to improve that and make that change. So that's really a bit about what we're trying to do and how you can potentially help us. And I guess what you might be thinking is, how do we decide on what groups that we support? We have to focus somewhere. And obviously, as I said, we want to be able to support everyone, but at the moment we have a key focus on 3 key groups, and refugees. Refugees obviously is a key one, which is why you're here today. So I'm just going to very briefly bring your attention to some of the evidence behind that in terms of thinking about why we're doing this. And just a couple of things to highlight. We know that, for example, refugees are 4 times face unemployment rates that are 4 times higher than the UK average, which is really quite staggering. We also know that refugees often will take any job that they can get because they just need to be able to work, and they want to be able to settle into the UK. And actually, it's not necessarily, whilst that's fine to a point, it's not necessarily making the most of the skills, expertise and experience that they can potentially offer an organisation and also help them be a success in terms of their own aspirations and their own career. So it's probably enough from me for the moment, because I could talk about lots of different stats and things, but actually what we want you to hear from is our panel, and really kind of have hear from people who really know more about this. So I am going to hand over now to my wonderful colleague Leah, who is going to introduce our amazing panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamila. Great to see so many of you on today's session, and I don't doubt it's because we've got such a panel of experts joining me. So I'm going to introduce them more fully in a second, but for now I'm going to invite B from RefuAid, Anastasia, Hoda and Victoria just to come onto camera and unmute themselves for our discussion. And whilst they're doing that, let me explain who they are and where they're from and what they're going to contribute to today's discussion. B from RefuAid is one of our co-collaborators, co-conspirators, if you like. She'll be working with us on our upcoming pilot this autumn. She is the senior requalification and employment caseworker at RefuAid. And I think what B will be able to do when we come to her in a moment is really build on what Jamila has introduced there, give us a bit of a scene set the context, because we know that context is key, and also explain really some of the challenges that refugees face when they are transitioning into the UK and how you as a profession can help them ease that. Welcome, B. Anastasia is joining us today. Delighted to have you. Anastasia is not just a CIPD student member, but also a recent bursary recipient from the City and Guilds and CIPD Bursary Trust Fund. Anastasia will be able to share her own personal story and her lived experience of actually transitioning to the UK herself. But hopefully her insights will help us really think about this work in real terms, about the differences and impact we can make. Welcome, Anastasia. Hoda is joining us now. Hoda is wearing two hats today, which I love. So she'll be flitting between both. But she's head of HR, I should say, at the Institute of Contemporary Arts. And Hoda is in, I guess, the enviable position of being a mentee and a mentor. So she's somebody who is experiencing the support of the profession whilst also giving back to some of our recent recipients. So we'll be quizzing her on that and also understanding the benefit that mentoring can bring. Welcome to you, Hoda. And Victoria is coming again with two hats, I suppose, as a member of the profession, but also critically as an employer who's been active in this space and has tapped into this untapped pool of talent. And for me, I think, and Victoria will tell you a little bit more about this in a minute, has some of the most key practical ways of actually making change in this space. So a huge welcome to our panel. The way this is going to work is I'm going to ask each of them in turn to just have an opening conversation with me to get the conversation started. Whilst they're doing that, don't forget what Jamila said. Do populate the Q&A with all your questions. We'll try and come to as many as we can at the end. But fear not. If we don't, we've got wonderful people covering the chat. My colleagues Ali and Zoe will be in turn managing the chat and the Q&A and feeding us questions. So if we can't get to them today, we'll answer them in the chat or offline. So let's get stuck into it because I know time is ticking. B, I'm going to ask you to unmute first of all and come to you first of all, as I said, to give us a bit of a context, a scene set, and explain to us and give it sort of some reality behind some of the stats that Jamila shared about the challenges that refugees face and some of the myths and misconceptions that might be out there.
Thank you so much, Leah. That's fantastic. Yes. So building on, I suppose, what's already been mentioned, there are a lot of barriers that refugees and asylum seekers face when arriving in the UK in terms of employment and other things as well. So one main thing that we kind of addressed initially when RefuAid was founded in 2015 was the access to language. And that's kind of the first stage that we try and overcome through our language programme. There's also a problem with access to finance provisions and able to actually pay for the costly reaccreditation pathways that refugees and asylum seekers must do because their internationally received skills and qualifications aren't actually necessarily recognised in the UK. And then also employment as well, which is where RefuAid's 3 core programmes came from. Within that, we've managed to identify myths surrounding employers with refugees and hiring refugees in different ways. And I think that the main one that Maisie and I, who also works at RefuAid as well, were discussing this morning, was just that some employers feel as though refugees have a lack of skills and experience, mainly because maybe they are not aware of the certain qualifications that they have, or they might look a little bit different, or there's some difficulties there getting them translated and verified to be able to apply for jobs, like maybe a UK citizen would. And actually that comes from just not knowing and a sense of being removed from the problem. But actually, what employers do realise is that if they are able to hire refugees, and we've had 200 clients from RefuAid that have been hired into work commensurate with skills and experience, that they're able to tap into a pool of talent that they would otherwise be unable to work with. And actually, not only does that diversify the kind of work environment, but it also offers really valuable and perspectives from people that have been trained all over the world. And I think that's one of the main myths then, that yes, it seems to be that employers lack that kind of awareness about maybe why somebody has a gap in their CV or why they haven't got UK work experience. And part of what we try and do is advocate kind of why that's not necessarily something to be concerned about, and try and kind of work with employers to understand why this is the case.
And it sounds like, I mean, I'll see lots of people nodding in a moment. I think from what you said, in a tight skills market at the moment, it's critical to look at untapped pools of talent in that way and just get the sort of reassurance and confidence to do that. And it seems like things like today hopefully will help do that, because it busts some of those myths and it allows information to be shared in that way. From your perspective, it's really interesting, I think, what you're talking about, that translation of accredited skills, etc. B. Thinking about the difference that the profession, the HR profession, the people profession can make. What are you hoping for from this work that we're going to do together in the autumn?
Well, I think it's a very exciting opportunity, because I'm aware that kind of lots of workplaces, HR are the people that would maybe have the influence over things like this. Quite often maybe work with the hiring managers and are the people that are making these sort of changes in the workplace, and making the kind of push for different maybe areas and demographics of people to be welcomed in. So I think that's why it's so important that this is kind of being piloted with the CIPD Trust, because ultimately the people that are on this call today are the people that might actually have quite a lot of influence over who joins their workforce. And it's really important for us to be able to kind of act as people that can provide information and kind of, like you say, bust some myths and answer some questions that are very much fairly held, about maybe why it is really important to consider opening up, and also being slightly more flexible to people with that status and not being worried. Sometimes I think when people see a different status, it can be quite worrying. What does that mean? Do I need to sponsor their visa? Do I need to do something differently in terms of hiring them? Is there a different contract? And actually just being able to kind of offer a bit of information about how it's actually very straightforward and things like that is something I think will be really useful.
Absolutely. Thanks, B. That won't be the last we hear from you. We're going to bring you into the conversation in a minute, but I would like to invite Anastasia to unmute and join us. And tell us from your personal experience, Anastasia, as someone who has transitioned to the UK and translated their skills to the UK, tell us about that experience and tell us about some of the challenges you faced on arrival.
Thank you, Lee. Welcome, everyone. Well, first of all, just to pick up on the previous conversation regarding myths and stereotypes, I am a Ukrainian who came to the UK under the Homes for Ukraine scheme in 2022 when the war began. And just to give you a snapshot of my career, I've managed a multi-million-dollar company. I've been an academic director of a technology management program, and I've been a human resource business partner of a large multinational technology company. So refugees, as we call them, come in different shapes and sizes and experiences. And again, there's no way of knowing who you got into this country until you check and ask and interview these people. So yeah, we'll get there about being open and seeing the potential. Coming back to your question, Lee, about the translating skills into the UK market. I would say that the first challenge is the feelings and the condition you come in, because you are not just migrating for work, you are fleeing from the war, active warfare, where tanks were riding around your house. So it's a different situation, and probably the first condition I dealt with was sleep deprivation, because I was a human resource business partner in a large company with over 400 people, and right before the war, a few months before the war, it was so worrisome to be inside, to be near Bucha, near Kiev, that at some time I just found myself waking up at 5 a.m. checking the news, whether anything is happening, and then having nap for another hour before we started work, or driving children to school. So sleep deprivation, and it continued because when the war began, I was still in my HR capacity, and we were evacuating people. With some, we lost contact for over a month. They were under occupation. So it was like we were restless for quite a bit because we were worried, about people, their condition, their lives. So sleep deprivation is one. Facing two realities, because you're physically in safety, you're physically in the UK, but your mind, because I've had 40 years of work and life in Ukraine, your mind is still partially there. So facing these two realities, that on one hand you need to keep rolling here, on the other hand you're worrying about all the people you knew, and every day you open the news and you see they bombed something else, and you go like, how much more? When is it going to stop? So being into realities is another challenge, and being homesick, of course, is part of that. And probably also the feeling that, when the war begins, you feel like the walls of your house have fallen. So, all the things you believed in, the world turned upside down. So it takes there's lag time to adapt to the new reality, to realize it takes a lot of a lot of brain work to, to understand that this is reality and it's happening. So when we talk about feelings and condition, that's one thing. Knowledge, when you transition to a new job market, is another thing. So just basically the market research, knowing who the employers are, what is needed, who they need, what skills they need. For instance, my family, we ended up in the northeast of the UK. And when we first were so excited because there was safety, there's a house, we could sleep. And then you exit the door, you go like, okay, where are all the companies, where are all the employers? And all we saw was pheasants and deer and rabbits and other game, and one pub in the village, and not even a shop. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to do it? How I'm going, to pick up my career in this condition? So not knowing the market, just, where to move further in the UK. I worked in IT, so it's just knowing all the further steps. So market research is one. Networking is another one. In my case, I moved with 2 teenage children, so I cannot move too much far away from them. They're in school. I have this limited time frame for networking and traveling. So building a network in a new place is another thing. And I've already mentioned location. So not even knowing where to move, where the need for qualified labor is another thing. When we come to skills, I came across some refugees who are in need of English language training. And then certifications is another thing. So for instance, I know a very good female who is a children's dentist. She's excellent, but she came here and she cannot work as a dentist. So she started to be a distributor for a dental products company because she doesn't have all the certifications. But in a way, when you look at the person in terms of human potential, that's a waste of her potential, because she's just ideal as a dentist. So certifications is definitely a big thing, and that's why I applied for CIPD, because that's the qualification of the HR profession, and I need to have it just to be on par with everyone else. Mentorship, I would say that mentorship is important, because apparently there's different culture and there are different behavior and different attitudes. So just knowing these nuances helps, and local people, local HRs can definitely help new employees adapt better. And last but not least, there is uncertainty about the legal status. So for instance, Homes for Ukraine, the UK government has given us 3 years, so 1.5 of which is gone. And then what happens when May 2025 comes, nobody knows. Will they be offered something else? Can we apply for asylum? It's unclear at the moment. And again, it's worrisome for us as employees, and it's worrisome for employers, because they don't know. There's time to adapt in the company, and there's time to perform when you in. So at the moment it's uncertain, but still, I wouldn't say that it's a roadblock to employ people, and for them to perform during this time.
Thank you, Anastasia. And I know that's not the last we'll hear from you. We'll involve you in the conversation in a minute, but I think some of the things you touched on were huge. And hopefully this webinar is a means to remove that roadblock, as you say, and help people flourish. I think picking up on some of the things you talked about with market research and the network and the power of the network and how an HR professional can make that happen. I'm going to bring in Hoda now, because obviously with your two hats, Hoda, thinking about you as an HR professional, but as a recipient of mentoring and as a mentor yourself to people in this position, what is the difference that an HR professional can make in that setting? Because it feels like there's lots they could do. So tell me about that.
Thank you, Leah. I think that as HR professionals, what we could do is just creating space and also making sure as HR professionals we don't make assumptions, because talking to my mentee, for example, a lot of the conversations and barriers that she was facing with work, her experience is extensive. She has like over 20 years experience. She has more experience than I do. But going for roles that were, say, on a lower level, she was still being turned down, because I think people were assuming she's originally from Ukraine, therefore doesn't have the right to work, or maybe leaving the job soon. And so we had to work together a lot about how to like work on the CV. And I feel like what I was doing was more helping her understand like British culture, because she has the HR knowledge, and it's just understanding like, oh, this is how typically we write CVs, compared to maybe slight differences and tweaks of like what people are asking for, what expectations that they have for you. But in terms of being a mentee and being a mentor, I think there's so much like benefit to it. I think I've learned so much about myself, and it's also kind of with my mentor, like she's challenged me, she's made me think about like long term, what do I want to do, what do I want to gain out of this, be focused. And I think like one thing that I struggle is like HR is like, who does HR for HR? And I think like that's the great thing about the mentoring scheme. You have that support, you have that network. And as part of the aspiring HRD, we even have a cohort, and we're all on each other's WhatsApps, which is great. So we're just helping each other there as well. So I feel like there's a support system there, which is great. But I think the problem sometimes comes down with HR is we always want someone that will hit the ground running and can adapt to a job quite quickly, but we have to realize that that too can be a form of discrimination, and that is also creating barriers and not seeing the potential that someone from a different lived experience can bring.
I love that. I think it's really important what you were talking about then is we talk quite glibly about mentoring being a benefit to both sides, but you explain that really clearly for us, Hoda, in terms of the learnings that you're getting from the process, and that sense of community that hopefully programs like ours that are starting in the autumn with RefuAid and engaging the whole of the people profession will allow us to come together. I'm going to come to Victoria in a minute, but just before I do, just a quick reminder to put your questions in the Q&A. My colleague Zoe is doing a great job of marshalling those, and we'll come to a few in a moment. But that idea of sort of hitting the ground running, some of the common misconceptions, I really want to explore with Victoria, because we have recently been put in contact, and actually of all the conversations I've had with employers, Victoria has engaged in this space and has some really practical tips to share. But I think starting from the beginning, you've actively recruited refugees into your own workforce within McPhee, Victoria. But tell us a little bit about the experience, the benefits, but also the challenges. People want to hear about some of the stuff that is harder to think about. So tell us a little bit about your experience.
Thanks, Leah. To be fair, our experience with it has been relatively simplistic. We've just adapted our processes to make it a bit easier for refugees to enter the workplace. So we took out the need for CVs and interviews and things like that, and tried to remove those barriers. And essentially what we did was held a bit of an open day, where a number of potential candidates could come along, meet our teams, learn more about our business. Those that wanted to, continue on that journey, we offered a sort of essentially a paid work trial, that they could, come in, do the job on the shifts that we had on offer, work with the team, see what it was like, whilst getting paid for that at the same time. So they got sort of real life working experience of doing the process. And from that, we had, a couple of really good candidates that stayed with us thereafter as well, which has been fantastic. We couldn't have done it without the support, so we linked in with the Scottish Refugee Council, and I'm sure they do similar work to what RefuAid do. And I would, strongly suggest anybody considering going down this path, you link in with an organisation like RefuAid, and they will absolutely guide you and keep you on the right path. For us, they did things like understanding English ability. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be in a position where we could have anybody that had no English language, for health and safety reasons, that they need to be able to communicate with us. And that's where the Scottish Refugee Council came in terms of, they filtered out that side of it. And then we got candidates going forward from there as well.
Brilliant. I mean, there's a couple of things that come out from that I love. The first being that your approach was to make the whole process just a bit more human. And as you say, remove some of the barriers that existed that for many people assume that you have to use a CV and you have to. This is so. In as you say, fairly simplistic terms, it was a change that you could make readily as an HR professional to make that process more human. So there's something that people can take away. I loved what you said about partnerships there, Victoria, because I think that is critical. And for us at the CIPD Trust, we do not have access to this untapped pool of talent. We have to rely on expert partners like RefuAid, like the Scottish and the English Refugee Council. So that's a really huge part of what we do. What would your advice be to other employers? Because I think going back to Bee's point, there's a lot of nervousness, maybe people need some reassurance, some confidence in this space. Having done it, are there key things you'd say to other employers?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I'd absolutely do it again. We've got, some amazing candidates through the process, like Anastasia had been saying, refugees is just, the title that's put on this group of people, but they're highly skilled, highly educated, very competent people that come in and do a fantastic job. We aimed it initially at sort of production operative level, so sort of on the floor job roles, which a couple of employees came in and did initially, but very quickly we've seen that they had much more to offer the business, and they've moved roles into different roles. So one gentleman's now a multi-skilled engineer, which is notoriously a really difficult position for us to fill. So being able to find that experience and qualification that we could then sort of transfer these skills over to match our areas was just fantastic. So for me it was a no-brainer, really. It's these guys are fantastic, and they've really worked well for our teams as well. They've really integrated well.
And your one thing that Victoria hasn't mentioned is that in terms of other challenges, you have rural and transportation challenges where you are based. So again, it's about looking at untapped pools of talent to help that process and enrich your workforce in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
So we've got two sites, and predominantly we sort of piloted the programme in our Glasgow site, but we're looking to move it up to our Aberdeenshire site as well, and that's where we're finding the biggest barriers, that a lot of the population don't necessarily have readily available transport. So we're looking at what other ways can we get around that, and what else can we do to support to try and make that commute a bit easier.
Absolutely, and I think that's the part where HR professionals and employers can make a difference. And to Anastasia's point, if you're looking out and just seeing deer and pheasants and trying to navigate the local landscape, what can we do to remove barriers in those instances? I'm going to pause there because we are starting to get some questions in. And actually, Bee, we've got a question that I thought you might want to have a stab at answering first. Talking about sort of, are there trends in terms of skills and expertise that you see when people arrive in the UK? Are there particular demands for certain skills and expertise?
Yeah, so thank you. So we work with many different professions. About half of our clients out of the, we've supported about 1,600 now, and about half of those people have been healthcare professionals and students. But also within that, there's engineers, accountants, HR professionals, anything varying from HGV drivers to teachers, loads of different things. And quite often what we find is that people who are internationally qualified in those certain professions may have a master's degree, which isn't necessarily something that the UK would demand for some of those roles. And that's something that can be quite challenging, because people might come to the UK, 20 years of experience, master's degree, but actually there are still more things that they need to do in order to return to their work, a bit like what other people have touched on earlier. The kind of other trends, I think it seems to be that some employers might think that actually from some countries and some people's home countries, it's more experience than it is qualifications and skills. And actually we've identified that's not the case. People quite often have very critical qualifications, whether that be, like I said, master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and a variety of other qualifications as well. So in terms of trends, yeah, people are often highly skilled, highly experienced, and highly qualified out of the people that we've supported. And it is just a matter of being able to translate those across. And I think something really interesting, I was just thinking when Victoria was speaking as well, a little bit about sort of the benefits that can bring to your business, and I suppose your company as well, just looking at the contributions that our clients have made. And I guess you can kind of scale that maybe more widely. Out of the 200 people that we've supported in their return to work that's commensurate with skills and experience, before they had access to our finance programme, they were contributing between them about £100,000 in tax, whereas now it's over 1.5 million. So when you just look at kind of the other benefits as well, it's not only that talent pool, it's also in terms of it's economically viable and it's feasible. And actually, you know, some of the bigger corporate companies and people that we've worked with, being able to kind of show them that as well is something that's very important. So something maybe to take away, looking at kind of the stats behind things as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge business benefit right there, as well as Victoria touched on, the sort of tenure and the promotional aspects of somebody coming into a business with high level of skills that can actually be translated. Hoda, I'm going to come to you next, and then I've got a couple of questions for Victoria and Anastasia. From your perspective, we've talked about the benefits of mentoring, and we've got a very clear ask at the end of this webinar about how people might want to get involved from the profession. What would you say to anyone thinking about mentoring and wanting to get involved? What would your advice be?
Anyone that would be interested, I would strongly recommend it, because I feel like I've gained more through mentoring than I have through studying and working. I think it allows you to be vulnerable. It allows you to ask those questions that you may not feel that you can ask at work, because you might have to, you're worried about how you put yourself forward. And one of the biggest things I was sort of struggling with was imposter syndrome. And the first thing that Elaine, my mentor, was like, we're going to get rid of that. That was the first interaction we had. So that was really helpful. I think it's also understanding that with mentoring or being a mentee is that it works both ways, and you gain just as much as you give is what you gain. So I think it's really beneficial, and there is such a support system within the whole sort of scheme, and you come out gaining a lot more than you think you would. And it's not something that you can kind of get through studying or reading through textbooks and stuff like that. It's like coaching and also having a support and a friend, all sort of rolled in one.
Absolutely, I love that answer. Victoria, I think one of the challenges we have in the trust and more widely in this space is how to offer that sort of reassurance and confidence to employers, and really exciting them by the proposal, reassuring them that it can be done. Webinars like today are a really useful way of doing that. Is there anything you would have found useful as an employer, sort of casting your mind back with the benefit of hindsight, that we could employ when we're trying to get more employers behind this, do you think?
Yeah, I suppose for me it would be communication on a wider level. So it's it's all well and good doing it with the population that are coming in, but you also need to think about the population that are already in the business and what impact it has on them, and helping them to understand as well. As Anastasia and Hoda have mentioned, when you're coming from these situations, there are other considerations there. These guys haven't just moved for their own free will. It's, they've had to come across their flee in, pretty horrific situations in some cases, and that's going to have an impact. So you need to equip your teams and the people that are coming in with, good wellbeing resources and support networks and mechanisms in there as well. I suppose a bit more understanding and a bit more on the front foot of having these things available for all. That would have probably been one thing that I would say is something that we would definitely need to consider.
Definitely, and that's really sound advice. And Anastasia, coming to you, I guess to sort of round things up, bearing in mind your experience, which I think you've articulated really helpfully for the people on this call to better understand your situation and how employers and the profession itself can help, what would you want to see done differently? What support would you want to see available? for somebody making that very difficult and forced transition, let's be clear, to the UK?
Well, as an HR professional myself, I really believe in human potential. I think it's limitless. I mean, we as humans can do a lot and achieve a lot together. So I would encourage fellow HR professionals to see the potential. Basically, the refugees are a gold mine. Everybody's looking for gold now, and human potential is a gold mine. So the refugees are hardworking, motivated. It's not only about the money, it's also about the self-esteem in the new place. So seeing the potential is the first thing. Then second thing is proactively searching for them, because the job centers know us all in face. We had to address the job centers when we arrived. So the social workers from the local councils know where the refugees are. They know exactly because they visit us. There are also groups on Facebook and Telegram. So just to give you an idea, there is Ukrainians in tech who have worked in the IT sector, who have AI skills, I mean, coding skills, you name it. So there's a whole group on Telegram, people looking for work. There's also a group of graduates of American exchange programs who are based in the UK now. So they have fluent English, they are educated, they're from all walks of life. So there are ways to reach them. If you don't know how to reach them, but you need Ukrainians, reach me out, connect on LinkedIn, and I'll show you where these groups are. I can just post. There are also Facebook groups for English hosts for Ukrainians. All Ukrainians also there. So we are easily findable. We are not hiding. So proactively search for Ukrainians or for other refugees to be employed. I'm more aware of the situation connected to my country. Show opportunities. So for example, you know, some jobs were demanded in our country, but some jobs are demanded here. So show opportunities. We're quick learners. If we need to learn, nuclear physics, we'll learn it. It's no problem. We have mathematicians, we have engineers, we have people who know languages, who know technology. I mean, it's not a problem to learn something new. And then last but not least is be understanding. Just to give you a practical example, since I arrived, I was involved with the British Army that's training a lot of Ukrainian soldiers in the UK. It's not a secret. It's all over the news. And there are a number of Ukrainian people helping there because they need interpreters and people who know the culture and just helpers who have the language skills. So there was a young woman who has excellent English, very capable, and then they played a Ukrainian hymn in the morning when we have a minute of silence at 9 a.m. And she just burst into tears. So of course, everybody who was there didn't, they looked like, is she okay? Is she mentally okay? But I could relate to that totally because, it's for us now, it's still ongoing. And you feel like you're from the Red Book. You're a species that can be extinct. Somebody's trying to kill you now, your people. So in that sense, just be understanding that it's not that we have mental issue, it still hurts, that what the other army is trying to do to us. So basically, be understanding and accommodating and just give time, because time cures, it will pass. Yeah. But at the moment, it's still, it's a wound that still hurts. Yeah.
And do you know what? Those are very powerful words. Thank you for sharing that. It can't be easy. But to echo what you say, the human potential is limitless. I think that is probably the best quote to sum up today. I could talk to all of you for much longer, but I'm conscious of time, and I think you fielded all our questions brilliantly. What I am going to do in a moment is hand back to Jamila to close up today's sessions, but I'd like to say thank you to Bea, to Hoda, to Victoria and to Anastasia for sharing your personal experience, but also some really practical things that we can do. I think what's up to us now is to hand that baton over to the people profession to work with the trust to see how we can make some change here and effect real change. And I think a few of you said it before, not least the human potential is limitless, but HR have the power to make the changes to policies, practices and perceptions. So a huge thank you to our speakers. I'll let you turn your cameras off and breathe easy for a bit, and we'll catch up after this. But thank you so much. And back to Jamila for a little wrap up. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Leah. And yeah, I think that's something that's going to really stick with me in terms of what Anastasia said around that human potential. And actually, this is really all about what we're going to talk about in a moment. So we'll just get the slides up in a sec. But it's really about helping individuals really reach that human potential. I hope everybody got a lot out of that panel session. I know I definitely did. There's definitely some things that I'll take away with me, so I hope you've got that from that today as well. But to wrap up and really kind of the real call to action for today, because I'm sure many of you will have learned something from this afternoon, and also really want to know how can I get involved, what can I do to support. So you've heard from B, and we are working very closely with RefuAid. We have been on our bursary programme, and now we are also about to launch our a mentoring pilot. And the idea of this is really to be able to support people who are refugees who are newly in a role, and to provide mentoring support to help them have the best chance of success and support them with that transition into the UK. You heard from Anastasia earlier some of the outside challenges that people are facing who are in this situation, but actually they still have they've got a huge amount to offer. And I think one of the things that I really took away from this is really don't make assumptions about the people who find themselves in this situation, who are dealing with the challenges that comes with becoming a refugee, and being understanding about that. But this mentoring will really focus on what you can bring as people professionals and your skill set. So really about that knowledge about the world of work, helping people to navigate that whole kind of change in how we work in sort of the UK workplace, how you can help people navigate some of those challenges, and understand how working places work and the kind of culture and those kinds of things, and help these individuals have a best chance of success, and helping them build their confidence and really be able to navigate working in a very new environment. So we will be looking for up to 10 mentors to support 10 of RefuAid's clients that they're working with. So we really want you to get involved, and what will happen is an expression of interest form will be going into the chat very shortly. So if you're interested in getting involved, please fill that out as soon as you can, and then we will follow up with having a brief call with you just to kind of chat with you, and then from there we will decide who the 10 mentors will be. And if we end up with more mentors than we need, then we will think about what we're going to do in terms of that, and whether we support more people, or whether there's opportunities that you can get involved in. But we need your interest, and we need you to sign up. So please, my colleague Zoe has put in the expression of interest form in the chat now. So if you click that link and complete that would be fantastic. I can hope as many of you as possible want to get involved, because this is just the start. This is just the pilot, and we're hoping to expand this work much more in the future. And hopefully everything you've heard today has really inspired you to kind of get involved. Very briefly, I'll just give you an idea of what the timeline will be. So obviously we're asking you to register your interest now, and we'll confirm mentors over the course of the next few weeks. We will be running another session with RefuAid which is going to be a bit more of an info session for the mentors who will be taking part in the pilot, and this is just a chance to get a bit more understanding and help set you up in the best way possible, give you a chance to ask any questions that you might have in terms of getting started and things to think about, and really just help you set you up as well as we can before the mentoring starts. We will be hoping to introduce you to the mentors to their mentees before Christmas, so you can at least have that initial introduction, with a view for the mentoring to really kick off in the new year in 2024. Can't believe I'm saying that already. And that mentoring is expected to take place over around 6 months, normally meeting around fortnightly is what we recommend, but that will kind of be, obviously it's a pilot, we need to see how this works, and obviously we will be keeping in touch with you and being there as a kind of contact point throughout the pilot, with a view to complete it within the summer and think about what's next, but obviously we'd want to hear from mentors as we're going through. So that hopefully gives an idea of how it will work. So all that we want you to do is complete that expression of interest form, get in touch with us, and hopefully some of you will be taking part in the pilot, which is really exciting, and a really hopefully tangible way that you can get involved now. So I think the only thing that remains, we're going to just run a very quick poll, just to check in with you and see what you got out of the session. And we will also, I know a few people had to leave early, and I've seen lots of amazing comments as well in the chat. It's really great discussions. So that's brilliant. We will share the slides afterwards, and we will send a follow-up email as well. So even for those people who have had to sign off early, they will also get the link to that expression of interest form. So yeah, so the poll has just been launched. So if I could ask everyone to just complete that, and then we can, and then we will wrap up. So I think people are submitting. Brilliant. I think most people are, well, we're still getting some answers through, but our question is, following today's session, do you feel more informed about supporting refugees in work? And I can say everybody so far has said yes, which is exactly what we wanted. So all that remains to say is thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Complete that expression of interest form if you're interested in becoming a mentor and supporting our pilot with RefuAid, and keep in touch with us if you want to know more about what we're doing and if you have any questions. So thank you very much, and massive thanks as well to our amazing panel. It was a really stimulating discussion, and I hope you all got something out of it. So so thank you to Leah for chairing it. Thank you to Bea from RefuAid, from Anastasia for sharing her very personal experiences, for Hoda for sharing both being the mentor and the mentee, and also Victoria for sharing a bit more about what they've been doing at McPhee, which I think was really really interesting. So thank you.